All right.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody. Happy Thursday, or as we like to call it, pre-Friday, or the eve of Friday Eve. We are so glad to host this second meeting of the Mountain Housing Council's Regional Housing Implementation Plan. This is the second of two, in which the last meeting we kind of gave a primer. And today we're going to really kind of take you behind the curtain of a process that we've been working on. And actually wanted to just, frame our conversation a little bit today with just this acknowledgement that we are all feeling the pressure and loss of what has transpired in our region. We've seen so many of our neighbors and friends and colleagues move away because they've lost their housing. And we continue to see that happen every day. We've watched our businesses hang in the balance, and we've been on the other side of explaining to visitors and customers and clients what operating our businesses up here is really like when your workforce is not available. And it's creating challenges within our safety net system, as it has mental health implications and other insecurities for our families and professionals and individuals when, so much of your income or you're moving for the fourth time in 2 years because of housing. And so, I just want to first acknowledge that this is really hard stuff. And it's hard in our community, and it's hard in other communities. But imagine if our community had leadership across agencies, businesses, nonprofits that were dedicated to working differently to solve our own needs, to collaborate and align strategies and resources, and to develop a new way of working together across stakeholder groups to make it easier on accelerating housing solutions. Well, that is exactly what the Mountain Housing Council has been doing for more than 4 years, and our efforts have created stronger alliances across multiple jurisdictions. It's informed strategy and policy changes, and it's identified innovative solutions and helped launch programs, and ultimately supported the housing in this region, which is super exciting because, yes, there is actually real, tangible housing units going up. And at the end of this meeting, you're going to get an invitation to come see some of the hard work and real solutions that have been taking place across the community. But our success of, I guess we're tracking at about 500 units since we started, still doesn't feel like enough. We know it isn't enough. And so today, what we're doing is we're bringing you inside a process and vision for an easier way to align our regional resources to move housing forward. And this process recognizes 3 key stakeholder groups that.
You got muted, Stacy.
But it's so weird. So today we're bringing you inside a process that we believe can help align activities, conversations, and resources to make housing come up faster. And what you're going to learn about today is our very best efforts to think through the complicated process, dynamics, cultural disconnects that typically become barriers in seeing housing solutions, and work to create a readiness across those stakeholder groups so that when the public process takes over, there are more green lights than red lights. In a sense, the process and tools that we're sharing with you today are almost like a pre-game where we can build the muscle and test strategies with our developers and with our community before the big game in entitlements and funding and all of that. So once a development enters into a public process, it's expensive. It costs taxpayers a lot of money to move a potential development process through planning and approvals. And it equally costs developers a lot of money to take a chance on this part of the project. And everybody pays when the process is delayed because of misalignment of project goals to what the community needs or wants to buy into. And we just believe that we can do better. And so at Mountain Housing Council, we also know that we cannot build our way out of this situation. We are equally focused on creative solutions such as shared housing and unlocking homes and rooms for long-term rentals. And we know that this place, is worth all of our attention. It is special, and it needs to be preserved, and the community that lives here needs to be protected. And we just think there is a better way to do this, and we want to improve the system. So this work is hard, it takes time, it's complicated, but you showed up and we are here, and together we're going to keep moving forward. And I want to thank you for spending time with us. I'm delighted to hand this off to the program team, and on behalf of the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation and everybody who's been involved with this important work, welcome. This is going to be a great meeting. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Stacy, so much. I really appreciate the words. I thank you for setting the stage, providing the context. My name is Ashley Cannett, and before we get too into it, I just want to briefly review with you, where we're headed, and review a few general housekeeping type points, and then we'll get onto it. First, again, we appreciate your patience with this virtual platform and these constraints in trying to host meetings in this way, but we're very, very pleased you're here. Do want to let you know that this is being recorded, so we'll make it available to anyone who can't be here, or if any of you want to rewatch it. Just want you to know that's happening. And we've planned for opportunities and some discussion and plan for opportunities for some discussion and time to ask questions. But of course, please feel free to use the sort of raise hand feature, or we'll be on the lookout for real hands, but there are a lot of you, which is excellent. We'll also be monitoring and doing our best to respond in real time to any questions that may come up in the chat. But please be patient with us if we don't see it right away. So in just a moment, we'll move on to do some introductions, plus a poll that will tell us a little bit about who all of you are. We want to know who we're talking to. Following that, we've invited 2 speakers to share what we're calling stories from the housing development community. That's just a way of grounding us and reminding us of why we're here doing this work. And then we're going to highlight for you what this study has been all about and the key components of it. At that point, we have another poll activity planned just to help us understand what you see as our key opportunities moving forward. And then we'll really get into the meat of it, the presentation of what we're calling the AHA process, the introduction of what we're coining the housing hub, and then finally a demonstration of how the housing hub can leverage the AHA process to advance achievable housing for all. And I don't know if you caught that. AHA process, achievable housing for all. So we're going to have a lot of AHA moments during the course of this presentation, I hope. Then we want to hear what you think, and we'll have time for some Q&A before closing with some ideas about next steps. So with that, we want to introduce you to the full team here working on this with MHC and the regional partners. But while we're introducing ourselves, I'm going to, let's see if I can do 2 things at once. I'm going to launch a poll in the background that has some questions for you to answer. So let me go ahead and get that going. And then, Stacy, if you wouldn't mind, while folks are filling out this poll, introducing the MHC team, just so we recognize some faces up here. And then you can pass it back to me.
It is my pleasure to introduce Christina Kine. She's the Mountain Housing Council coordinator and keeps all of us honest and showing up to the right place with the right information and tracking conversations across multiple group activities across Mountain Housing Council. And then we also have joining us Tara Zuardo, the director of the Mountain Housing Council, and who really helps keep us focused at a strategy level across the different players that represent Mountain Housing Council, and focused on really the kind of subject matter content that's coming at us, not only locally, but raising up innovations and things that are happening outside of our region. And then we have a number of other TTCF members here. I just want to say, hey, shout out to our board and our staff. So thank you.
Yep. And I'm Ashley Cannett. I'm a principal with Economic and Planning Systems, and EPS is the consultant. We're real estate and land use economics consultants, and we're the prime consultant charged with bringing this incredible team together and delivering on all aspects of the scope of work. I'm the lone EPS representative up here tonight, but a lot of support behind me, a lot of support from Jake Craner and Kate Trainer. They're spelled differently and they rhyme, but they're not related. Couldn't have done this without them. And with that, I'll pass it on to probably a very familiar face to all of you, Steve Frisch with SBC.
Great, thanks, Ashley. I'm Steve Frisch with the Sierra Business Council. We're on the team. We're a sub-consultant to EPS, and our primary role in the project has been looking at kind of the development of tools and the policy side. I'm joined today by my teammates, Jill Sanford from Sierra Business Council, who has been working on communications and kind of technology and outreach, and then Brittany Benessy from Sierra Business Council, who's our Community Government Affairs Director, and has been looking at kind of the intersect between regional housing needs and state and federal policy and funding opportunities. So we're pleased to be here today and happy to hand it off to my friend, Steve Knoll.
Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon. Steve Knoll, Design Workshop. I too am solo. Tracy's not on the call. We are assisting the team in bringing some of the site planning and due diligence to this process, which we'll get into a little bit later when we talk about the pitch sheet. So I'm glad you could all make it. A great turnout. Looks like 56 to 60 people. Nice turnout.
And Steve, happy to see you back in your home in South Lake Tahoe after your evacuation. So,
yeah, but ironically, I'm down in Reno at someone's office.
All right, thank you. So that's the team and a lot of support behind all of these faces. I'm going to end the poll, thinking that was maybe enough time for you to answer some of these questions. And let me just quickly share these results so we can all see who we are. Can someone give me a thumbs up if you can see it? Yeah, okay, awesome. So first question, where do you live? Majority of respondents are from Truckee, 46%, followed by, I wish they would sort this for me so I don't have to see on the spot, but then second is other, but in California, 18%. Six of the respondents are in Placer County, followed by 3 from Nevada County, but not Truckee, and then other, but in Nevada. So most from Truckee, but good representation throughout the study area. Let's see, the second question here, did that just block for you guys?
Nope.
You can still see it, okay. So the second question is, we're really wanting to understand what your level of engagement is with housing issues in our community. So what perspective, what lens are you bringing when you show up to a meeting like this? So I work on housing related issues as part of my day-to-day. That's overwhelming here with 22 of you reporting that. That's 56%. That's followed by, I live in the region and I'm concerned about housing, not surprising. And then I'm seeing, let's see, I guess 10% is the next one. I'm a landowner or developer who would like to build housing in the region. So excellent. We're happy you're all here, regardless of your level of engagement, but this is good information for us to have. And then the third question, did you attend the first community meeting on August 25th? Pretty good, pretty even split with the majority answering yes. I indicated I'm not sure here just because we're all at so many meetings, it's hard to keep track sometimes. But thank you for responding to that poll, and let's move on now. Okay, so first up, we've got 2 speakers who are generous enough to share their stories with us tonight. The first speaker is Shellen Rodriguez of the Pacific Companies, working on Frischman Hollow 2, which is going to be opening soon, and I can't wait to hear more about this project. Shellen, can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Hi. Can everyone hear me, hopefully?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thanks. So I have 5 minutes and I talk a lot. So somebody can just like mute me or cut me off when I'm done or when my time is done. But I'm I'm the owner of SMR Development. I do a lot of representation of the Pacific companies, which is who I'm here to represent tonight. And I want to thank you for having us, and thank you for doing the work that you do. It is hard, to Stacy's point, and it's an uphill battle in a lot of ways. And as an affordable housing developer, the need is great, and it has gotten greater in many communities, and I'd say specifically in these high amenity mountain communities such as Truckee. Right, the need is overwhelming, and we feel lost when we're not able to house everybody who wants to live in these communities. But it's hard. Affordable housing development is hard, and it's risky. And as a developer, if we don't have a community that supports us, we have other communities that do. So I can't say enough how important it is for a community to have organizations like the Housing Council, the town of Truckee that has a housing coordinator, that has somebody that lives and breathes and thinks housing every day, all day, to have those people and philanthropic organizations like the Martis Fund, who has made it a priority to talk about and help support workforce housing. If not for those things, good developers will go places that have those things. So, good for Truckee for doing the work that they do. And so Frishman Hollow is what I came to talk about. It's, I don't want to take very much credit for it, because a lot of other folks at Pacific companies were much more closely related to the project, but it is one that will be at the ribbon, will be shown off at the ribbon cutting tomorrow. So hopefully folks are going to be attending that and have an opportunity to see it. It's been a labor of love. I think all affordable housing developments are. It is like I said, it's hard work. It requires collaboration. It requires, real partnership between the public and the private side. So, the regional support that we get in the Tahoe Truckee region is real. And it looks like everything from having a housing coordinator to kind of hold our hands or help keep us on track in regards to local entitlements. Having a group, that says you need help, whether it's with public support at a planning meeting or perhaps with some funding support. And we're going to put all of our tools or all of our resources in one place so that you have a one-stop shop, if you will, which I know is something that's kind of that many of you are thinking of, and the Housing Council is doing. And that those kinds of collaborative efforts really do create a scenario that a developer can be more successful in building affordable housing. And that's certainly what we felt at Frishman Hollow, it was 68 units. It's modular housing. We're a developer out of Idaho. So I'm one of those folks that does not have the privilege of living in Truckee, Tahoe. I spent a lot more time there pre-COVID when I could travel more, but the Pacific Companies has done a handful of projects in Truckee, as well as up in South Lake Tahoe, and working on, one in Placer County with our partners as well. So we've got a lot of experience there. And I think that one of the reasons that we keep coming back and keep going for it is because of the community support that we feel from the public agencies, the town, the county. I see folks that I've worked with on other projects here at the county, the mental health services in that regards, the regional housing authority, and I say county, both Nevada County and Placer County, just to be clear, and the state at the state level. I mean, the project in Frishman I was just kind of reviewing in my head, it had like 7 or 8 financing sources, and it came from state tax credits, federal tax credits, the Cal HFA MIP program, which really isn't in existence now, but it was a unique program that helped us really serve some of those higher income, more 60 to 80% AMI group, which is a really difficult group to serve. Martis Valley Fund, the town of Truckee donated their land. And, then of course, as the developer, we committed some of our fee into the project. So that level of collaboration doesn't come easy. I kind of list them off like it's just boom, 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 boom. But each one of those had public meetings. Each one of those had applications. Each one of those had people showing up to say, yes, we believe the Pacific companies can deliver. We believe in affordable housing. We believe that this community needs to serve everybody or serve the people that work and live here. So I guess I can't reiterate enough how important the funding, that all of those different sources and all those different local sources, how important they were in playing a role in the success of the project. So if there's any questions you have for me or Christina, I don't know if I wasn't tracking if my time's up, but it's exciting. I hope you guys can come tomorrow and check out. It'll be open in hopefully, fingers crossed, if we can get a temporary C of O maybe, or get a C of O without having all the landscaping in. We're not sure. We're still working through that, but hopefully by Thanksgiving, 68 families of individuals who work and play and live in Truckee will be at First One too.
Thank you, Shallon. I really appreciate the story, appreciate the perspective, and such a nice narrative about all the pieces that need to come together to make it happen, and right on time. And Chris, I'd like to turn it over to you. You're going to be speaking a little bit about a project that you have underway in the planning stages, as I understand it, and take it away.
Yes, ma'am, and thank you very much for having me. Thank you, everybody, for coming to this. This is wonderful. My name's Chris Romero. My company's Romero Construction. I've been a longtime ski bum and river guide when I was younger. I do have a face for radio, so sorry for anyone that's looking for me. I've been a custom builder in California for 20 plus years, building most of my life. And I've been in Tahoe since the early 90s. Up and down skiing. I was a competitive skier for a while. Always loved going up to Tahoe. Never loved the traffic of having to commute from the city. About 5 years ago, my wife and daughter moved up full time. So my daughter could go to school up there. I just felt it was a better fit for our family and just a little bit slower pace of life, and just a healthier lifestyle for us. So my daughter's now at Forest Charter and just loving it and loving the ability to learn at her own pace and under her own design. So I've been building in the Bay Area a long time, worked for some of the techies who have helped benefit Truckee and have also helped create this stress on the system up there. And I finally kind of felt at a point where I felt like I could make a difference. So I reached out to the town of Truckee, to planning, and said, hey, I'd like to do some affordable housing or see how I can help in the system. And they put me in touch with Shauna Doherty, who is an incredible resource. And it just cascaded from Shauna to Emily Vitas, to Steve Fritsch, to Steve Knoll, to Christine Walker, Heidi Volkart, Martis Fund. Just all of a sudden I had a full board of advisors and people that could help me navigate this process. And it started with one call. And I don't think I've seen that in any town anywhere in all the years I've been building. Like this, having a housing coordinator at the town level who's advocating for builders and developers and can put these teams together is an incredible resource. Being put in touch with Steve Fritsch, I mean, everybody seems to know Steve. Another just incredible resource, and is right there. He's right there at Town Hall, and just a wealth of knowledge to help us navigate all these different groups and different advocacies and in different needs. I didn't know anything about AMI. I mean, I've been working for millionaires for years, and what we came up with was an idea that there's a plot of land that would be interesting to develop, but we needed to secure it. So my first task was to secure the land, and I'm kind of learning as we go of what we need to do. And I know with Truckee, we have the resources, we have the heart or the drive to do it, and we have the support within the community to do it. But we also have different factors, wetlands and managing growth and coming up with designs that don't overwhelm the environment that they're in, and just getting all these groups together and come up with a common idea is great. So with Steve and Shauna and the businesses locally, we figured out on a piece of land on Brockway, and we're in the process of making something happen. And my a little bit different from what Shellon's company is doing is we're not going for that lower end of the affordable housing market because we felt that was being served pretty well. We're trying to help out what they're calling the missing middle, or what you all call the missing middle. So we're trying to come up with a model for a for sale single family residence of different sizes, a little bit higher density, to try to serve as many people as we can. So that's kind of my spiel, a little bit different from some of the bigger developers, but all coming from the same good place of wanting to help people and not watch our friends get pushed out of town as property values go up. So, and I can defer to Steve Frisch because he's been an amazing resource for me in learning it. He even put me in touch with Steve Knoll, who will be designing the project for us.
Oh, fabulous.
And I have to do mad props to Shauna Doherty again. Like it all started with her, and just she's an incredible person, and you guys are all so well connected. I'm looking forward to working with everybody.
Thank you, Chris. It tells such a good story of all the different people that it takes to put something like this together, and I appreciate your time, and thank you to you again, Shellon. And there may be some questions for you over the course of the hour. We'll see. So let's move in. I wanted to, for those of you who did participate in the meeting last month, you will have seen this, but I just want to again kind of remind everyone of what the overall scope, overall arc of the study has been. We were brought on board to prepare a regional housing implementation plan. Actually, we were brought on board to prepare a regional housing action plan, and we very intentional way decided to sort of rename it to be an implementation plan so that we're really moving towards implementation. With this regional housing implementation plan, our goal, as Stacy articulated so beautifully at the outset, is we're really trying to build housing readiness. And we see this in three ways. We need regulatory readiness, we need developer readiness, and we need community readiness. And you've heard that in the stories from Shellon and Chris, and you're going to hear it in the next few segments of this presentation tonight as well. And so what that meant in terms of study components, we started off by updating the housing needs assessment that had been conducted about 5 years ago. We presented that last August. We also reissued the employer and employee surveys. That's a chance to get some real-time feedback about conditions in the market, people's real-time experiences with housing. Those were also presented last time. We have prepared an inventory of all the housing policies and programs in play in the region, looking to all the different partner jurisdictions and trying to bring all of those programs and policies into one place so that there's a single collection, a single inventory. of all of these tools. We're calling it a tools matrix. And this is something that we are delivering to MHC, but it will stay live. It is not a finished product, this thing that we're handing off to them. They're going to continue to update and refresh and make sure that this remains a current sampling of the policies and programs and tools, incentives that are out there and available to be accessed. We're just about to talk about the site analysis and the AHA process pitch sheet, so I'm not going to say too much more about those, but that's another component of what we're delivering. And then throughout this process, there's been a lot of stakeholder engagement and community outreach. We benefited from the formation of a technical advisory committee and the stakeholder group who guided us along the way and provided us with some feedback, asked good questions, asked hard questions, and really helped us shape where we're headed. There have been a number of interviews. Steve has been busy making his connections and talking to people and just bringing in, as many perspectives and views as possible. And then there have been 2 community meetings. This is the second of the 2, but these are our ways of reaching out to the community and sharing what we've produced. And so with that, we're going to take just a little break from talking, and we've got another poll. And this is one that is really focused on identifying barriers that we hear discussed and looking at what if you flip the switch in your head and think of those barriers as opportunities. What happens? So we've tried to match common barriers with potential opportunities. And here we're curious. Let me just go ahead and launch this. We're curious to hear which of these barrier and opportunity matches have the greatest potential to result in achievable housing for all. So we'll give us all, there's a little bit to read here, but I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes or so. And you're welcome to pick more than one. You can pick 3. The Zoom format isn't going to keep you from picking more. So if you can self-constrain a little bit, we're looking to see which can have the most impact. I know you guys can't see it, but for me, it's really fun to see the results coming in.
I think it's really nice that we're not thinking about this as barriers. We're thinking about it as opportunities now, because that often is the first step to actually getting stuff done.
So I can see that about 56% have participated. I'll give it another couple of minutes. All right, we're kind of holding steady. Oh, nope, there go a bunch more. Just as I think we're done, there are a lot more responses.
We should have done a little clock at the bottom, like a countdown.
Well, I can see that it's been 2 minutes and 40 seconds. We'll give it another half minute or so. All right, 10 more seconds here. All right, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. And if I put it down here, can you guys see it better? Did that change anything at all? No. All right, we'll try. All right, so here we go. I have to make it easier for me to see, actually. Okay, so of the following barrier opportunity matches, two sides of the same coin, if you will, which opportunities have the greatest potential to result in achievable housing for all? And the highest response was this first one here, barrier, where the barrier is the regulatory constraints, with the opportunity being that flexible zoning requirements, density, parking, etc., are the flip side, are the way around that barrier. The next vote getter here is that if the barrier is that development costs are too high, the opportunity is to streamline the entitlement process to reduce time and identify opportunities for gap financing. The next one here at 44%, the barrier is identified as unclear public funding landscape, and the opportunity is described as create a go-to source of funding programs, incentives, policies. And I'll just go one deeper here at 36%. So more than a third of you said that this would have a big impact. If the barrier is common community opposition, if the barrier is that community opposition contributes to a lack of political will, the opportunity is that we can communicate pro-housing needs to the community and decision makers. So I'm going to stop sharing these. We'll hold on to them and share them back with MHC. But I think it's a good way of setting the stage for the next piece of the conversation. So let me pull up my presentation one more time. I lost it. Okay, so let's dive into the AHA process. The Achievable Housing for All process. The thought here is we're designing it to address many of those barriers that we just discussed and reviewed by leveraging the opportunities resulting in achievable housing for all. Let's dive in. So the AHA process really begins with the housing readiness triangle. And we described this at the meeting last time, but I think it's good to review it as we dive into some of the details. And it's a simplified way to think about housing readiness. All points of the triangle need to be aligned. They all need to be lit up and ready to go in order for housing projects to really move forward. One of the things that we see in the community time and time again is that even when one point of the triangle isn't aligned, it can really add years to the approval process. And if we know where we're headed, we can work on a process to get us there. So the housing readiness triangle is a way to think about readiness, and it's a process to build readiness. And this is the AHA process. Here we're really trying to push the envelope on implementation. It hits on all the points of our housing readiness triangle, the community, the jurisdictions, the developers. And what you're seeing here, we're going to go into each of these boxes, if you will, in a little bit more detail. But we start with site selection. Chris just told the story of his site selection. We move through due diligence and into incentives and financing. And you'll notice this double arrow between incentives and financing and site design. And this is the messy part of the process. This is where the hard work happens. This is where the creativity is most needed. And you might start with incentives and financing that might get you going with some preliminary ideas around site design, but then you might come back and revisit the capital stack, and you might just sit there and move back and forth for a little while trying to optimize your plan. And as you're doing that, you land on achievable housing for all. You get to a place where you are ready to submit an application to a jurisdiction, a thoughtful, considered plan that's working for all the points on our triangle. And you'll note community outreach is spread across the bottom from beginning to end. It's important from the get-go, and you need to stick with it all the way through the end. It is not just a box to check. Those are your allies right there. So diving in with the site selection, here it's really important to understand the community needs, the jurisdiction needs. This is maybe where the housing needs analysis that we worked on and the employer and employee surveys come into play, right? It's through that we have an understanding of what the community and the jurisdiction need. And it allows us to understand our target populations. It's also important to understand the history of the site, what past development efforts have been there, just know where you're going to hit certain barriers. And we need to identify and market the site to developers and really match to developer strengths. And that's part, you'll see that come up in the work that we're about to show. Moving through into due diligence, we really need to conduct the basic site research. So that's, let's figure out what the ownership structure is. What are the adjacencies? What are the access, opportunities, constraints, zoning, parking standards, environmental constraints? Chris mentioned wetlands. And here you might just understand the base case potential yield. If you went straight to the jurisdiction, said, what can I build? This is what you would get. This is also a good time to think about land assembly opportunities to the extent that that supports the project or creates additional capacity for an improved project. Incentives and financing. We as a consulting team really debated, what comes first? Is it the site design or the incentives and financing? And we landed, even though it's very iterative, we landed on putting incentives and financing first because it can really guide the planning. It can really guide your site planning work. So here what we're encouraging the folks to do is really review the potential funding programs, the financing sources, capital partners at all levels, right? Federal, state, local. We can't forget the private and philanthropic funding sources, which can really play a big role in a community like this. And then we want to assess the site eligibility for certain funding programs. Is there something about this site, location that makes it more or less competitive for funding opportunities that may be out there? As we move from that into site design, here you can begin to analyze the potential yield under rezoning or some of these incentive tools or bonus programs. And you can really integrate those incentive and funding requirements into the project design. We also need to consider all the health and safety design requirements at this point. And then you can take all of this input and really test the site coverage and the density scenarios. And then, most importantly, this might send you back to revisiting your funding and your incentive programs and tools. You might need to revisit the capital stack, and your financial strategy may change as the design evolves. And as you go back and forth, again, like I said, this is the creative process. This is the messy part and kind of the fun part. At the end of this, we are housing ready. We have landed at achievable housing for all. The prior steps have gotten us to the point that you're ready to submit a thoughtful application to the relevant jurisdiction, and you're ready to start coordinating with that jurisdiction to refine your incentives, discuss fee waivers potentially. You're ready to discuss the details that are going to allow you to maximize your site yield. And you're working with your neighbors all along the way to incorporate input, consider concessions, and community benefits. That's this community outreach. So start early by meeting everyone, introduce the concept, really hear concerns, identify allies, and then importantly, be an ally. And so that is a sort of overview of the AHA process. And now I'm going to turn it over to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Steve Frisch, who is going to introduce the Housing Hub concept.
Great. Thanks, Ashley. So one of the key recommendations of the Regional Housing Implementation Plan is going to be creating what is essentially a regional housing hub to act as an intermediary to work directly with the community, the jurisdictions, and potential housing developers to speed the process of designing, permitting, and building housing in the region. So this is where the tools begin to get applied to the individual projects in order to speed the process. The Housing Hub would act as a central point of contact that understands the communities and their needs and the sensitivities regarding housing development in the region. Also understands the jurisdictions, their processes, and their needs, what potential project being proposed could meet as far as the jurisdiction's goals and objectives for meeting the regional housing need. And then also understand the programs that could be applied to a specific housing project to make it more economically viable. So this is where the tools matrix is applied to the individual projects, and you begin to look at how do we make this project more economically viable so we can meet that housing need that we're looking to overcome. Like the regional housing needs assessment identified a need for roughly 6,500 units in the region across a wide range of different housing cohorts. So really looking at how do you tie the housing cohort that you desire to serve to the projects in order to meet all of those needs, because it is actually achievable housing for all, right? So the most critical role that a regional intermediary plays is to facilitate and orchestrate collaboration between all of the key actors in the region in order to achieve that collective impact that you desire. And I think this is really kind of a logical progression from the vision of the Mountain Housing Council, which has aggregated all of these entities together to create that welcoming housing environment that both Shalon and Chris mentioned. It is truly a unique thing, I think, in California to find such a nurturing environment for wanting to solve these problems. And that vision really originated with the Mountain Housing Council and its collective impact model. So the Mountain Housing Council would interact on a regular basis with the Housing Hub, which would then play this critical role in the region convened through the Mountain Housing Council, where that vision is set and implemented through the Regional Housing Implementation Plan. The Housing Hub's key role, next one, sorry. Jill and I don't have our cues down yet. The Housing Hub's key role would also be leveraging the tools and processes identified in the Regional Housing Implementation Plan. That's the inventory of tools, or the tools matrix that Ashley mentioned, the AHA process. So that would become kind of a systems kind of approach we could take to dealing with every project moving forward in order to try to speed its process. The pitch sheets, which you will see in a couple minutes, that Steve Knoll has done so much work on, and then the potential deployment of community capital to achieve that goal, which is filling the gap between that housing need and the supply that's available in the region. So the hub would be professionally staffed and managed, housed in a local organization, and would be of the community. So it's particularly important that this be someone who really understands Placer County, Nevada County, the town of Truckee, the local ground, all of the players, that network that both Chris and Shalon mentioned that needs to come to the table in order to collaborate together to achieve that impact. So the Housing Hub would achieve its objectives through three critical functions. The first is technical assistance. The second is program management. So in the technical assistance side, the way they would do this is work directly with developers to match interests with sites, match the product to the housing cohort. That's who needs to be housed and what sorts of products do they need. Help navigate the development process. So know all of the players, bring them to the table, and work on kind of that collaboration to get things to work. Negotiate concessions and incentives. So work with individual projects to understand through the tools matrix what could be done and what could be applied to the site to make it more desirable and more beneficial to the community, and then help the project secure entitlement. So if this means helping them putting together applications or other things, the types of things that sometimes it helps to know just who to pick up the phone and talk to if you have a problem, right? And to be able to get through immediately and say, wow, we need help with this thing. We don't understand it, right? So the next key function of the Housing Hub would be managing programs. So we are gradually, and I have to say, very forward in a very forward-thinking way, developing a number of programs in our local community in order to put people into housing and to make housing more available to people. So, but often it's difficult to know where's the one place that you can go to find all of these different things that are available. So managing programs would be kind of a strategic suite of contracted program management, which could include loan programs or other things for accessory dwelling units. It could include programs like the down payment assistance program that the Martis Fund has stood up. It could include tracking or managing deed restriction programs. The town of Truckee and Placer County are looking at a wide range of different types of deed restriction programs that would need some kind of management component to it. Could include providing or managing rental assistance programs or looking at anti-displacement programs. And as new opportunities emerge, thinking about what are the programs we need in our community to actually put people in housing. Sometimes it's as simple as pointing them to the right assets in the community, and people like locals landing locals, or the town's developing deed restriction programs, or sometimes it could be Community House, Sierra Community House, or others. So the next main function is access to capital. So access to capital means working directly with developers on securing sources of both public and private capital. And, I think you saw from the example that Chelan gave of the capital stack for some of these projects requiring as many as 5 or 6 different sources of capital in order to get them to work, in addition to commercial capital. So this is like working with the developer to figure out how do we assemble the capital stack that is actually going to work, and then assisting them with applying for that funding in the places where they need to apply for it. And some of those applications can be quite complicated and time consuming to put together. I know, having done several of the Affordable Housing Sustainable Community Program grants, that there are hundreds of hours of work sometimes to really put the perfect application together and ensure you get access to capital. And then the final and fourth function of the Housing Hub is really to act as an intermediary in case situations come up where property needs to be held or dollars need to be held for deployment on projects or programs. This is a little, this would be a function that would probably in many cases could go to a community land trust or to some other entities that have the capacity to do this. But we want to make sure that we don't leave the opportunities on the table because there's no one positioned to actually take advantage of them. So this is not really seen as a primary function, but a potential future function of the hub if it's necessary. So all of these things work together in individual projects to advance the entitlement process faster. And then once you understand what the project is, then you could begin looking at applying community capital to the project itself. And that could include everything from working with local jurisdictions on what their programs are, or tapping into some of the great work that's being done in our community by people like the Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency or the Martis Fund, who's been mentioned a couple times already as having been a critical player in advancing some of these projects, or working with those developers on state and federal capital sources in order to advance a project. And of course, the objective of all of this is getting to that end goal, which is achievable housing for all, right? So in our report, one of the key recommendations is going to be standing up this technical assistance provider, which is the regional housing hub that will play that role that was described by both Chris and Shalane for future developers.
Great, thank you, Steve. And you're up again. We're going to transition from that. So we've described the AHA process, and Steve just introduced the idea of the housing hub. And we're going to move into the AHA process pitch sheets. And I think Jill will share her screen for this, but you're going to see how these components can come together in a real world application.
Great. So one of the things that at the very beginning of this process to look at the housing implementation plan, we started thinking about as a team, and then after talking to a number of people in the community, realized would be incredibly valuable is just doing some of the background information on the key sites across the community that are potential sites for future housing. So this portion of the presentation is really intended to introduce this concept of the pitch sheets that represents one of the deliverables from the project. But the pitch sheet we're using is just an example that we're presenting today. And it's intended to demonstrate the process that would be applied to creating pitch sheets for a wide range of potential housing sites in the region based on the already completed site identification processes that have been conducted by the jurisdictions. Those site identification processes included a good deal of community outreach to assist in the identification and to understand what sorts of community benefits are desirable. So we don't really want to redo work that has already been done. The objective here is to look at what are the sites the jurisdictions have already identified and make sure that we're getting the best data and information about those sites into the hands of potential developers of those sites so we can begin them on this process of kind of working with the community to figure out what the best things would be to do. So the pitch sheets would be used by the Housing Hub as part of a systemic approach to improve housing readiness. That includes tiering off of that data in the regional housing needs assessment. It includes applying that inventory of tools to the site, applying that AHA process that Ashley identified, providing direct technical assistance to developers to consider developing on those sites, using the pitch sheets as the key tool, and then also to use those pitch sheets sort of as a description of the portfolio of projects that could be developed in the community to meet the housing need and to attract developers seeking to invest in the community to specific sites. So from the beginning of this process, everyone's shaking their head when I kind of describe it kind of like an artist portfolio book, you know? Like you have this book of 35 sites and you can look into the book and you can say, wow, this fits the type of product I like, or this fits my vision, or wow, this fits the people I want to serve. And that's kind of how an artist shows their work, or a community shows their kind of best face forward towards what could be done in their community. So we would see this being applied to 30 or 40 sites across the community. Of course, starting with the most important sites are the ones that local jurisdictions think the most opportunity exists on. So the pitch sheets are really developed on multiple properties across the region, based initially on that site selection process that was conducted by the local jurisdictions. And the site selection portion of the sheet, which is the next slide, Jill, shows the location of the project within the region. It shows the landscape and the surrounding neighborhood. It also shows the connection to neighboring properties. And the pitch sheets might include also new sites based on kind of the input from the community as the process moves forward. So there's the beginning of some basic information on what is on a site in the first set of the pitch sheet. The next section of the pitch sheet is the due diligence section, and I'll hand that over to Mr. Knoll.
Thanks, Steve. As we've all been kind of describing here, that there's been some sites already identified. The idea of these pitch sheets are to work with the jurisdictions to actually help fill out some of this information for potential developers, property owners that want to do something with the property. The due diligence aspect is just really kind of looking at what you can do here right now. If nothing changes, and just taking the matter of facts and applying it to the site. So it describes things such as what the parcel size is, the zoning, some of the utilities that will be providing connections, if that's the case, some of the coverage standards that might apply, particularly in the Tahoe Basin, which is a little more restrictive than other areas. Any unique conditions kind of at a high level that might be from an environmental perspective, or some offsite improvements, not necessarily getting to the exact, but recognizing that those may be elements that might impact the project itself, either financially or finding ways to partner with other people. Under the current conditions, with no changes or incentive applies, it's really kind of what we call the base case. So in the case of this project, we're looking at Brockway, which was identified, it's roughly 9.2 acres. And with the zoning of 10 units per acre, then you're looking at 92 to 93 units that could be applied. The example shown here in the graphic representation to the right, if we scroll over a bit, it's just really taking what you could do with that in mind, and in this case, apply basically 93 units with the parking required. I mean yes, required, and then starting to look at some of the other elements that would be interesting to support those living on the site, or else connectivity to the community at large. So this is just what we call a base case to apply what is allowed to date in the town of Truckee and get the yield that would then allow the site to fulfill what their density is. Keep in mind, for instance, in this particular site, there's about a 2-acre wetland that's associated with it. So that does limit the area that could be built on, but doesn't restrict the density that can be applied to the bigger site.
Great. The next part of the tour is the incentives and financing piece. So once you understand the base case scenario, it gives you the ability to look at the site and look at what sorts of incentives or financing or kind of other programs could be applied to the site in order to meet that cohort of housing need that you're trying to serve. So that could include things like looking at what are the density bonus opportunities on the site, what are the inclusionary housing standards, and how could you expand inclusionary housing standards to meet some of those cohorts more effectively. In some places, in some of the jurisdictions, there's a standard called dwelling unit equivalency calculation, which allows for counting studios as smaller than a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom unit. You could be looking at things like parking standards or setback standards in order to think, based on that base case and meeting the housing need that we want to meet, what are the other kind of adjustments that could be made to the site to better meet the need in the community? And then the second part of that process would be looking at what are all of the different financing and program options on that site. Is there an opportunity on the site to make some of those available for a deed restriction purchase program? For example, the below market rate program that the town is currently exploring, or deed restriction programs that Placer County or someone else might have in place. If there's a for sale portion of the property, is there an opportunity to apply down payment assistance programs to that property? Is there an opportunity for publicly financed land donations on the site or on another site? Also looking at what kinds of off-site improvements could be financed through other state or federal programs, like the state infrastructure grant program or the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities program. And then look at opportunities for things like low interest public financing, either from the local or the state level, or application of federal tax credits or other things. As Shalon kind of referred to, there's a list of like 40 different financing tools that can be used on affordable housing sites. Most developers really only know about a few of those tools. So part of this process would be taking them through that full tools matrix to make sure that every opportunity is being found for the individual site to make it more financially viable. So once the incentives and financing are applied to the site, then the next opportunity is to go into this iterative process that Ashley described of looking at incentives and financing and site design simultaneously. So for every, as someone once said, everything that appears to be free has a string attached. So the reality is there is no such thing as getting an incentive without also having some requirements that need to be done. And this is the process. This is where really the meat of the work would occur. This is the process of applying the incentives and financing, to the property, and then analyzing the potential yield based on the application of those incentives and financing, and then testing that development program against a set of proformas. So what incentives and financing can you take, and then also essentially maintain a program proforma that allows you to meet the housing cohort that is desirable and get a reasonable return on investment. So this is kind of the place where you're probably going to end up doing multiple site designs against multiple financing scenarios to figure out, how do I make this thing pencil? And that leads to the next piece, which is an optimized site design.
Yeah, and kind of based, so you have two images next to you. The left one is obviously the base scenario we started with. The one on the right is what we call optimized, just for the sake of showing how this might play out. The idea here is, of course, to align the project with what the needs assessment for the community is. So it's really critical to understand how that is. So in the case of this, we're using the Town of Truckee dwelling units equivalency standards. We're able to just put a hypothetical scenario together, which of course can be something that can be adjusted based on what that the needs assessment is. So in this case, we used a range of anywhere from studios to 3 bedrooms and mixed it quite a bit. Truckee has a kind of interesting equivalency where, as Steve mentioned earlier, studio accounts for 0.5 of a unit. So if you imagine, if all we did was studios, we could do at the 10 per acre, we can get quite a few units on there. But this idea is to say we're going to be mixing and matching, so to speak, providing a wide range from studios to 3 bedrooms. What we're able to do by this simple kind of using this equivalency standard and applying it to the site, we're able to see that we could increase from 90 to 130 units, which is quite a bit of increase when you start thinking about providing a range, as well as still meeting some of the desires of the community. You can also look at then some of the other things that are important, such as the open space and public spaces within the site, as well as connectivity. And Steve mentioned to me that it does increase the number of inclusionary by 60% from 14 to 20. So it provides that opportunity as well. And then this could be increase the number of units that might be available for purchase or deed restrictions. And of course, it creates a public benefit to be incentivized and financed as some of the options that Steve described earlier. So it's really kind of a simple diagram to show how working with the standards currently, and then how you might adjust that. And then the next overlay would be how that might be with the community involvement and financing.
Yeah, so I do want to reiterate that we're only using this as an example. This is not a proposal that is being submitted to the town or anyone else tomorrow. We were using this to demonstrate essentially what the pitch sheet could do, which really designed to work with an individual project developer to meet the cohorts of housing that are identified. In this case, the cohort we were trying to meet was that market for studio 1 and 2 bedroom units, where the project on the left is 3 bedroom units and the project on the right is an additional number of units, but smaller sized units to fit the housing need. So I think another critical piece of this that is really important is that throughout this process, there is ongoing community outreach, which is incredibly important. And yet another kind of function of that housing hub and the pitch sheet together. So it's community outreach would be an ongoing process throughout both the development of the pitch sheets and the process of identifying those optimized alternatives. The public outreach could include meetings with jurisdictions, community members, neighbors, and interest groups. Community outreach is conducted in advance of the actual project submittal, which then kind of decreases the likelihood of community conflict over proposed projects. So all of this is designed to really get us to this readiness piece. So the piece of this readiness triangle that this meets is really both the community readiness and the developer readiness to bring a project forward to the jurisdiction. So the pitch sheet becomes essentially a critical part of that kind of achievable housing for all process, which aligns the housing need with the tools to meet the need, the technical assistance to use the tools, and the incentives or financing to get the projects built. So this is kind of like one of the core tools that would be used in the process to kind of speed the development process to the best project being put forward to the jurisdictions. And that's the end of your tour of our Prezi sheet.
And we are thinking, thank you, Steve's. And we're thinking at this point, you are bound to have questions, you are bound to have comments, you're bound to have observations about all of this. And so what we're going to do is, if any of you participated in the meeting in August, you might be familiar with the platform we used. It's called Padlet. And Jill is going to drop a link to the Padlet in the chat, or maybe Christina will. What we're going to do here is I'll let Jill pull it up, and then it will be easier for me to describe. All right, so Christina just put the link to the Padlet in the chat. If you have another monitor, or if you've got room on your monitor to look at 2 things at once, please go ahead. But what you're seeing up on Jill's screen is the Padlet. There are 6 items up here, and they're the tools that we've described tonight or produced as part of this study process, all of which are driving towards this goal of seeking community buy-in to solutions, buy-in to the process, and really getting to achievable housing for all. And what we're hoping for is a response to the question that's up on top there, which is, do you think the tools we've described and showcased here have the opportunity to leverage the opportunities that we were talking about at the beginning of the meeting? And this can be that's a specific question, but you can feel free to enter any general comments or observations as well. And I think, Jill, would you mind giving everyone an overview of just how to use Padlet?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So first things first, you do have to click the link in the chat and open it up on your own. Either minimize Zoom or have it side by side, whatever works for you. But then once you're in it in your own browser, it's pretty simple. You'll just hover your cursor over one of these plus signs, type your comment in. Typing real time here. And then you go ahead and just hit publish, and then it'll show up for everyone to see. And there are these 6 columns of tools we've talked about over the course of these presentations. And that's pretty much it. I'm right here in the chat. If you have questions, I'll go ahead and hop in and respond to those.
Yeah, thank you, Jill. It's really tempting to try to click on the screen that Jill is sharing, but you do have to go into the chat and open it up in a separate browser. But then in real time, we can see whatever feedback you care to provide. But here we've indicated the regular surveys that we described. That's the employer and employee surveys that we presented at the August meeting and that we referenced tonight. The last time that one was done, I guess, was as part of the update back in 2016. But with regular updates to this survey, would have better real-time information about the state of the market and the state of housing needs. The second item there are the regular updates to the housing needs analysis. This is the quantification of the needs analysis and the different demand cohorts that, again, if you were at the meeting last time, we presented those results. We didn't show it, but it was behind the scenes of all of this, everything we presented tonight. That's the regular updates to the inventory of the housing policies. This is the compilation, the compilation of all of the tools that various jurisdictions in the region are using to get to achievable housing for all. The AHA process we described, and it was showcased in the pitch sheets. Steve Frisch provided an overview of what the housing hub could be like as a place to hold technical resources and to manage programs and help access capital, etc. And then the AHA pitch sheets, Steve Knoll and Steve Frisch just walked you through that tour. So we're eager to hear what you think might have the most impact or what you think might be useful.
And we also encourage you to interact with other folks' comments. You should also be able to kind of expand comments, scroll, and just interact with each other. Just showing the scrolling feature here so that everyone knows that there are probably comments stacking up in various columns here soon. And Steve, we do have a question in the chat if you wanted to look at that while folks are leaving their comments.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Chase asked, what an incredible resource while we were presenting the hub and the AHA process and the pitch sheets. He says, how will the hub creation and staffing be paid for?
Chase, what a great question. The value of being able to speed these processes is so great that we believe we can find community capital to pay for many of these services. However, I want to note there's also an opportunity to create essentially program management opportunities that can help underwrite part of the cost of the services as well. So the next step after the completion of the regional housing implementation plan is going to be starting to work on kind of what a business plan and a financing plan would look like for that regional housing hub. So, but really good question.
I'm actually going to add that question into the Padlet so that it remains part of the record. So we're going to give everyone a little time to kind of read through this and figure out Padlet if you haven't already and add comments. Seen a lot of comments about the need for and the importance of the regular surveying of employers and employees in the area.
Yeah, I also want to note that Susie Turney asked an important question too when we were talking about site aggregation. Like, what exactly do we mean by land assembly responsibility or opportunities? And I just wanted to be clear that, in some locations in the community, it might be necessary to actually work with multiple property owners in order to create the opportunity to do a project. But I also want to note that it isn't like something Stacy said at the very beginning of the meeting, that there's a broad range of approaches being developed by the Mountain Housing Council and within this housing implementation plan to meet the regional housing need that includes shared housing, unlocking unused housing right now, looking at developing ADUs in the community. So it's not like this approach is solely around larger housing projects. It's really going to take all of those different approaches in order to meet the need that we have in the community of those, roughly 6,500 units. So, but yes, Susie, in some cases, it might mean working with adjacent property owners to assemble land together to create a project opportunity.
Interesting comment under the AHA process pitch sheets. Seems like a perfect use of public funds, a good way to introduce efficiency into the system rather than multiple developers conducting the same analysis over and over. Exactly the idea.
Yeah, that's a perfect, yeah.
And also,
I see the comment about looking at the incentives having liabilities associated with them. That's exactly what I was referring to when I said every one of these programs has some kind of string attached to it that then requires that you redo your program pro forma so you will understand what the ramifications of making those decisions are. And I think that's really a critical function of the hub and a function that we've been finding a need for as we've been working with developers in the community on what could get done. I can think of a project that we've redone the pro forma 4 or 5 times in the last 6 weeks.
and here under Housing Hub, essential to have this intermediary to achieve the housing readiness goal. And to the updates of the needs analysis, great in understanding the changes in real time. Yeah, the regular updates to the housing needs analysis and the surveys really go hand in hand. They work together because the needs analysis is limited to publicly available published data. So we always have a little bit of a data leg there that is over time is part of an important story that we need to tell. But the survey gives us that real time feedback, which is really important. Learn something new tonight. If nothing else, that's great. Under the AHA process. Yeah, potentially more communication needed around just connecting dots about wages and incomes that allow folks to participate in the market, and how that translates to how we're now defining achievable housing for all. I understand that comment. Well, I wonder, Steve.
I do think that comment under the AHA process brings up a really important point too, which is that there really is a need for ongoing community education about what is very low income, what's low income, what's affordable, what's area median, and what specific housing cohorts are we trying to serve, right? And I kind of agree with that sensitivity around the kind of lack of kind of understanding in our community about what all of these different cohorts are. Because at the same time that we need, supportive housing for the homeless, we need very low income housing, and we need affordable housing, and we need achievable housing simultaneously. So we're going to be going through this ongoing balancing act of essentially trying to satisfy all of these needs and not leaving anyone behind. That's the whole point of housing for all, right? But
Steve, I want to
put that in there. I want to thank them for putting that in there.
Me too. This is Stacy, and I just want to this is a very evergreen conversation held among our partners in Mountain Housing Council. And, the achievable definition includes the lowest wage earners as well as up to that missing middle. So we try to encompass, everybody in that. And this year with the new needs assessment, we actually recognize that it's a bit of a moving target. And, as the economy changes and housing prices changes, what's achievable for community, of workforce and seniors, and, quote unquote, longtime locals, continues to be a moving target. And so, these definitions get really challenging, but we've done our best to keep it up. And I think, there's two final things. It's like what is quote unquote affordable is dictated to us by, the federal formula coming out of HUD. And there's just a lot of resistance that just because affordable says affordable in that, and targets that lower wage earner doesn't mean it's affordable to the rest of the community. So we really were trying to solve that. But the other thing that we continue to try and recognize is when you right size people into the type of housing that fits their economic stratosphere or their time or lifestyle, like time of life or lifestyle of life, like not everybody wants a single family home at a certain stage of life. Like once you start to kind of create targets across that ecosystem of economic, that stratosphere of economic capacity, then people start to move into the right types of home. And so, suddenly if you have more 2-bedroom houses, then 5 professionals sharing a 4-bedroom house end up going into the right size, moving out of a, 4-bedroom house, which then allows that next one. And so that's kind of how we landed on this achievable, why we encompass the whole spectrum of that economic stratosphere, why we do concern ourselves with diversity of housing stock, not only single family unit, but also, to multifamily unit and tiny homes and cottages and fourplexes and all of that good stuff, but also the economic side. And I think there will always be this argument that I think is a worthy one. And Steve is very passionate, and we have wonderful debates about this, which is, you still have to focus on our lowest wage earners. I mean, they still require that level of public subsidy. And I think, as public entities, we have to kind of grapple with that. So I wish there was like this perfect black and white argument in my head. And I know for some people there really is, and I respect that. But I think I just wanted everybody to understand the depth of thinking that goes behind that and why we landed and continue to land. And it's it's kind of valuable as communities are as well. So thank you for letting me share and interrupt, Steve.
You didn't interrupt me. I'm kind of looking forward to the conversation.
So I think we can leave this open for just a little bit longer, but then move on in the discussion as well. What do you think, Steve? Did you have that?
Yeah.
Okay. So many good comments here. I do want to let everyone know, again, I'm so impressed with the thoughtfulness of this community's comments, and we will save these. We'll kind of create a PDF out of it and make sure that that's part of what we deliver to MHC. And I think there's such good input here. Some real important feedback also about the surveys for next year, and just really good guidance and suggestions as this work continues. And so the Padlet can stay up in the background, maybe even for a little bit longer. Jill, I don't know when and how you close it, but we will continue to accept feedback for a little bit longer. And I think at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Tara, who can talk a little bit about next steps for this. Where does it go from here when the consultant team kind of, packs up and moves on to the next project? How does this continue to live on and really get implemented? So with that, Tara, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Ashley. And I hope that we can rope you into every step of our next steps as well. And as everyone knows, Steve Frisch will be with us forever. So that's wonderful as well. So as Ashley mentioned, this kind of wraps up at least looking at kind of our latest, our housing needs assessment and kind of where we are in terms of kind of the units that we need for which AMI levels, as well as the tools that we have available to us and the tools that we need, at least at the moment. And of course, moving into kind of Mountain Housing Council's role of implementing the regional housing implementation plan, as well as kind of where we go from here. There are a few kind of main aspects to these next steps. We talked a little bit today about kind of the infrastructure aspects of these next steps. We talked about the hub. We talked about kind of some of the basic physical and organizational structures and facilities needed to kind of ensure that we provide this concept of achievable housing for all in a sustainable level. We talked about the hub itself as a concept and moving towards it and how we might build it and sustain it. There are going to be some additional tools that you'll learn a little bit more about. One of the very important tools that you will learn more about is a community capital piece that the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation has put in place to help finance development-ready projects. It is called the Housing Solutions Fund. And you will learn more about this as the Community Foundation helps to educate the community more about this through outreach. But outreach itself is going to be a really important kind of arm of this next step. And making sure that we not only kind of help to educate the community about these tools that we have in place, such as the Housing Solutions Fund and the Hub, and more infrastructure that we have in place and will put in place, but also learn from the community and bring back to our programs, ideas from the community that we need to put in place to help with housing, and then bring those back into the community. So these are just some of the aspects of what we're going to move forward with to help with housing and put in place achievable housing for all at a sustainable level. So with that, I also want to let folks know who don't already know about this very important event on October 1st, which is tomorrow, that our partners, our jurisdictional partners have been working very hard to put some new housing in place, and it's going to be released at a ribbon cutting event tomorrow. Close to 300 new units are being released tomorrow by the town of Truckee and Placer County. Workforce housing units within 5 new developments, Coldstream Commons, Frischman Hollow 2, Truckee Artist Lofts, Meadowview Place, and Hopkins Village, all tomorrow at a free ribbon cutting event. If you haven't RSVP'd, there's information put up right there where you can RSVP and attend the event. It starts at 2:00 with some housing tours, followed by a ceremony and reception. So all of the info that you need is there. You can visit our site to RSVP. You can also find out more about, registering to live at these units as well, and apply for them on our website as well. And then I also just want to let folks know that our next quarterly meeting is on October 22nd. And we also have some free lunch and learn events if folks want to learn more about other housing topics as well. Our next one is on October 21st, and it'll be on wildfire resilient housing, actually. So just go to mountainhousingcouncil.org to learn more about these various events and housing projects, and make sure that you attend the ribbon cutting event tomorrow as well. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Are there any other announcements you guys wanted to make before we adjourn? All right. Well, thanks.
Steve wanted to say something, but he was muted.
I just think it's so important that we're celebrating this success tomorrow. So
yeah,
it's really easy for us to get in the mindset that we have a huge mountain to climb and it's going to be hard. But the reality is we've done so much. And that is really to the credit of the Mountain Housing Council and the jurisdictions and the developers who have come forward with these projects. We're getting more done here than any other community I know in the Sierra Nevada. And I actually checked yesterday to see how many new housing units were released last year in San Francisco. And it was right about 300. Like, think about that for a minute. That we've been able to really, like, we identified a problem, and through this collective action, everyone has been able to dig in and celebrate this success tomorrow. It's an incredibly important thing.
Yes. And it's a lot of individuals working night and day to do everything that they can to make this happen and house as many people as they can. So those folks should have a real pat on the back.
Yeah.
And some of them have been mentioned today. So it is really important. Yep.
I just want to jump in and thank Ashley and Steve Knoll and Steve Frisch and the entire team backing them up for all the work on this regional housing implementation plan. This has been a journey, and we look forward to releasing the report to the community. But just thank you so much for all that you guys have done, and it feels like we've achieved a milestone here together. So thanks.
Well, thank you, and thank you to everyone who spent some time with us tonight, letting us tell you a little bit about the work that we've been doing. Really appreciate everyone's time and energy and thoughtful comments.
Thank you all.
That's our show. Have a good evening.
Good night, everybody. Happy Friday.
Bye.
Eve.
See you tomorrow.